Hare Krishna, my dear devotees, welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books, right here in the Haven, which is in Hythe, Kent, southeast England, just a stone's throw from the English Channel. Abhay Das Brahmachari and myself are here, trying to hold down the fort and keeping the sound vibration going. This Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is the Nigamakalpa Tador Galitam Palam. It is the ripened fruit of the Vedic literatures. And Nigama means Shruti, and Agama means Smriti. So even though the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is known typically as a Smriti because it's a Purāṇa, the Mahapurāṇa or the Bhagavat Purāṇa, Srila Jiva Goswami classifies it as Shruti. Due to this Nigamakalpa, Tador Galitam Palam verse, Srila Sanatana Goswami glorifies the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam and explains what it is in his Śrīmad-Bhāgavata Mahima Stotram, and it goes like this. Sarva Shastrabdi Piyusha, Sarva Vedaika Satpala, Sarva Siddhanta Ratnaja, Sarva Lokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana, Śrīmad-Bhāgavata Prabho, Kali Dvandoditaditya, Sri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshakshadayate Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Sri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Madhika Bando Matsangin Madguru Man Mahadana Man Nistadaka Mad Bhagya Mad Ananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu Sadhutadayin Atini Chuchatakada Hanamunchagadachin Mam Premna Rit Kantayokspura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we reached the 27th chapter of the third canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Understanding Material Nature, as Kapila Dev continues to enlighten his mother Devahuti in the science of Krishna consciousness. We're beginning with text 25. In the dreaming state, one's consciousness is almost covered, and one sees many inauspicious things. But when he is awakened and fully conscious, such inauspicious things cannot bewilder him. Purport. In the condition of dreaming, when one's consciousness is almost covered, one may see many unfavorable things which cause disturbance or anxiety. But upon awakening, although he remembers what happened in the dream, he is not disturbed. Similarly, the position of self-realization or understanding of one's real relationship with the Supreme Lord makes one completely satisfied, and the three modes of material nature, which are the cause of all disturbances, cannot affect him. In contaminated consciousness, one sees everything to be for his own enjoyment. But in pure consciousness, or Krishna consciousness, he sees that everything exists for the enjoyment of the Supreme Enjoyer. That is the difference between the dream state and wakefulness. The state of contaminated consciousness is compared to dream consciousness, and Krishna consciousness is compared to the awakened stage of life. Actually, it is stated in Bhagavad Gita, the only absolute enjoyer is Krishna. Actually, as stated in Bhagavad Gita, the only absolute enjoyer is Krishna. One who can understand that Krishna is the proprietor of all the three worlds and that he is the friend of everyone is peaceful and independent. As long as a conditioned soul does not have this knowledge, he wants to be the enjoyer of everything. He wants to become a humanitarian or philanthropist and open hospitals and schools for his fellow human beings. This is all illusion, for one cannot benefit anyone by such material activities. If one wishes to benefit his fellow brother, he must awaken his dormant Krishna consciousness. The Krishna conscious position is that of pratibuddha, which means pure consciousness. Text 27. The influence of material nature cannot harm an enlightened soul, even though he engages in material activities, because he knows the truth of the Absolute, and his mind is fixed on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. Lord Kapila says that Mayi Manasam, a devotee whose mind is always fixed upon the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is called Atmarama, or Vidita Tattva. Atmarama means one who rejoices in the self, or one who enjoys in the spiritual atmosphere. Atma, in the material sense, means the body or the mind. But when referring to one whose mind is fixed on the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, Atmarama means one who is fixed in spiritual activities in relationship with the Supreme Soul. The Supreme Soul is the personality of Godhead, and the individual soul is the living entity. When they engage in reciprocation of service and benediction, the living entity is said to be in the Atmarama position. This Atmarama position can be attained by one who knows the truth as it is. The truth is that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the enjoyer, and that the living entities are meant for his service and enjoyment. One who knows this truth and who tries to engage all resources in the service of the Lord escapes all material reactions and influences of the modes of material nature. An example may be cited in this connection. Just as a materialist engages in constructing a big skyscraper, a devotee engages in constructing a big temple for Vishnu. Superficially, the skyscraper constructor and the temple constructor are on the same level, for both are collecting wood, stone, iron, and other building materials. But the person who constructs a skyscraper is a materialist, and the person who constructs a temple of Vishnu is Atmarama. The materialist tries to satisfy himself in relation to his body by constructing a skyscraper, but the devotee tries to satisfy the super self, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by constructing the temple. Although both are engaged in the association of material activities, the devotee is liberated and the materialist is conditioned. This is because the devotee who is constructing the temple has fixed his mind upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But the non-devotee who is constructing the skyscraper has his mind fixed in sense gratification. If, while performing any activity, even in material existence, one's mind is fixed upon the lotus feet of the Personality of Godhead, one will not be entangled or conditioned. The worker in devotional service is in full Krishna consciousness, is always independent of the influence of material nature. Text 27. When a person thus engages in devotional service and self-realization for many, many years in births, he becomes completely reluctant to enjoy any one of the material planets, even up to the highest planet, which is known as Brahmaloka. He becomes fully developed in consciousness. Purport. Anyone engaged in devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead is known as a devotee. But there is a distinction between pure devotees and mixed devotees. A mixed devotee engages in devotional service for some material benefit, whereas a pure devotee engages in devotional service for the spiritual benefit of being internally engaged in serving the Lord in His transcendental abode, in full bliss and knowledge. In material existence, when a devotee is not completely purified, he expects material benefit from the Lord in the form of relief from material miseries, or he wants material gain, advancement in knowledge of the relationship between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entity, or knowledge as to the real nature of the Supreme Lord. When a person is transcendental to these conditions, he is called a pure devotee. He does not engage himself in the service of the Lord for any material benefit or for understanding of the Supreme Lord. His one interest is that he loves the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he spontaneously engages in satisfying Him. The highest example of pure devotional service is that of the gopis in Vrindavan. They are not interested in understanding Krishna, but only in loving Him. That platform of love is the purest state of devotional service. Unless one is advanced to this pure state of devotional service, there is a tendency to desire elevation to a higher material position. A mixed devotee may desire to enjoy a comfortable life on another planet with a greater span of life, such as on Brahmaloka. These are material desires, but because a mixed devotee engages in the service of the Lord, ultimately, after many, many lives of material enjoyment, he undoubtedly develops Krishna consciousness, and the symptom of this Krishna consciousness is that he is no longer interested in any sort of materially elevated life. He does not even aspire to become a personality like Lord Brahma. Text 29. My devotee actually becomes self-realized by my unlimited causeless mercy. And thus, when freed from all doubts, he steadily progresses towards his destined abode, which is directly under the protection of my spiritual energy of unadulterated bliss. That is the ultimate perfectional goal of the living entity. After giving up the present material body, the mystic yogi goes to that transcendental abode and never comes back. Purport. Actual self-realization means becoming a pure devotee of the Lord. The existence of a devotee implies the function of devotion and the object of devotion. Self-realization ultimately means to understand the personality of Godhead and the living entities, to know the individual self and the reciprocal exchanges of loving service between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entity, is real self-realization. This cannot be attained by the impersonalists or other transcendentalists. They cannot understand the science of devotional service. I want to read this last part again. Self-realization ultimately means to understand the personality of Godhead and the living entities, to know the individual self and the reciprocal exchanges of loving service between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entity, is real self-realization. To know the individual self and the reciprocal exchanges of loving service between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entity is real self-realization. They cannot understand the science of devotional service. This cannot be attained by the impersonalists or other transcendentalists. They cannot understand the science of devotional service. Devotional service is revealed to the pure devotee by the unlimited, causeless mercy of the Lord. This is especially spoken of here by the Lord, mat prasadena, by my special grace. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Only those who engage in devotional service with love and faith receive the necessary intelligence from the Supreme Personality of Godhead so that gradually and progressively they can advance to the abode of the Personality of Godhead. Nishriyasa means the ultimate destination. Swasangstana indicates that the impersonalists have no particular place to stay. The impersonalists sacrifice their individuality so that the living spark can merge into the impersonal effulgence emanating from the transcendental body of the Lord. But the devotee has a specific abode. The planets rest in the sunshine, but the sunshine itself has no particular resting place. When one reaches a particular planet, then he has a resting place. The spiritual sky, which is known as Kaivalya, is simply blissful light on all sides, and it is under the protection of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita 4.27, Brahmano hi pratishtaham. The impersonal Brahman effulgence rests on the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In other words, the bodily effulgence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is Kaivalya, or impersonal Brahman. That impersonal effulgence, in that impersonal effulgence, there are spiritual planets, which are known as Vaikunthas, chief of which is Krishna Loka. Some devotees are elevated to the Vaikuntha planets, and some are elevated to the planet Krishna Loka. According to the desire of the particular devotee, he is offered a particular abode, which is known as Swasangsthana, his desired destination. By the grace of the Lord, the self-realized devotee, engaged in devotional service, understands his destination even while in the material body. He therefore performs his devotional activities steadily, without doubting, and after quitting his material body, he at once reaches the destination for which he has prepared himself. After reaching that abode, he never comes back to this material world. The words lingad, vinirgame, which are used here, mean after being freed from the two kinds of material bodies, subtle and gross. The subtle body is made of mind, intelligence, false ego, and contaminated consciousness, and the gross body is made of 5 elements, earth, water, fire, air, and ether. When one is transferred to the spiritual world, he gives up both the subtle and gross bodies of this material world. He enters the spiritual sky in his pure spiritual body and is stationed in one of the spiritual planets. Although the impersonalists also reach that spiritual sky after giving up the subtle and gross material bodies, they are not placed in the spiritual planets. As they desire, they are allowed to merge into the spiritual effulgence emanating from the transcendental body of the Lord. The word swastangsanam, the word swasangsthanam is also very significant. As the living entity prepares himself, so he attains his abode. The impersonal Brahman effulgence is offered to the impersonalists, but those who want to associate with the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his transcendental form as Narayana in the Vaikunthas, or with Krishna in Krishna Loka, go to those abodes, wherefrom they never return. Text 30. When a perfect yogi's attention is no longer attracted to the byproducts of mystic powers, which are manifestations of the external energy, his progress towards me becomes unlimited, and thus the power of death cannot overcome him. Purport. Yogis are generally attracted by the byproducts of mystic yogic power, for they can become smaller than the smallest or greater than the greatest, achieve anything they desire, have power even to create a planet, or bring anyone they like under their subjection. Yogis who have incomplete information of the result of devotional service are attracted by these powers. But these powers are material. They have nothing to do with spiritual progress. As other material powers are created by the material energy, mystic yogic powers are also material. A perfect yogi's mind is not attracted by any material power, but is simply attracted by unalloyed service to the Supreme Lord. For a devotee, the process of merging into the Brahman effulgence is considered to be hellish, and yogic power, or the preliminary perfection of yogic power, to be able to control the senses, is automatically achieved. As for elevation to higher planets, a devotee considers this to be simply hallucinatory. A devotee's attention is concentrated only upon the eternal loving service of the Lord, and therefore the power of death has no influence over him. In such a devotional state, a perfect yogi can attain the status of immortal knowledge and bliss. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. What purports? Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the third canto, 27th chapter of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, entitled Understanding Material Nature. All glories to Kapila Dev. All glories to the process of pure devotional service. All glories to the knowledge that leads to pure devotional service. Gaur Premanandi. Hari Hari Bol. Okay, we're at 7:53, and we have this choice. To continue into chapter 28. I think we'll continue into chapter 28. Chapter 28, Kapila's instructions on the execution of devotional service. Text 1. The personality of Godhead said, "My dear mother, O daughter of the king, now I shall explain to you the system of yoga, the object of which is to concentrate the mind. By practicing this system, one can become joyful and progressively advance towards the path of the absolute truth." Purport. The yoga process explained by Lord Kapila Dev in this chapter is authorized and standard, and therefore these instructions should be followed very carefully. To begin, the Lord says that by yoga practice, one can make progress towards understanding the absolute truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the previous chapter, it has been clearly stated that the desired result of yoga is not to achieve some wonderful mystic power. One should not at all be attracted by such mystic power, but should attain progressive realization on the path of understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, which states in the last verse of the 6th chapter that the greatest yogi is he who constantly thinks of Krishna within himself, or he who is Krishna conscious. It is stated here that by following the system of yoga, one can become joyful. Lord Kapila, the personality of Godhead, who is the highest authority on yoga, here explains the yoga system known as Ashtanga Yoga, which comprises 8 different practices, namely Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. By all these stages of practice, one must realize Lord Vishnu, who is the target of all yoga. There are so-called yoga practices in which one concentrates the mind on voidness or on the impersonal, but this is not approved by the authorized yoga system as explained by Kapila Dev. Even Patanjali explains that the target of all yoga is Vishnu. Ashtanga Yoga is therefore part of Vaishnava practice because its ultimate goal is realization of Vishnu. The achievement of success in yoga is not acquisition of mystic power, which is condemned in the previous chapter, but rather freedom from all material designations and situation in one's constitutional position. That is the ultimate achievement in yoga practice. Text 2. One should execute his prescribed duties to the best of his ability and avoid performing duties not allotted to him. One should be satisfied with as much gain as he achieves by the grace of the Lord, and one should worship the lotus feet of a spiritual master. Purport. In this verse, there are many important words which could be very elaborately explained, but we shall briefly discuss the important aspects of each. The final statement is Atmavid Charanacharam. Atmavid means a self-realized soul, or a bona fide spiritual master. Unless one is self-realized and knows what his relationship with the super soul is, he cannot be a bona fide spiritual master. Here it is recommended that one should seek out a bona fide spiritual master and surrender unto him, Archanam, for by inquiring from and worshipping him, one can learn spiritual activities. The first recommendation is Swadharma Charanam. As long as we have this material body, there are various duties prescribed for us. Such duties are divided by a system of 4 social orders, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. These particular duties are mentioned in the Shastra, and particularly in Bhagavad Gita. Swadharma Charanam means that one must discharge the prescribed duties of his particular division of society faithfully and to the best of his ability. One should not accept another's duty. If one is born in a particular society or community, he should perform the prescribed duties for that particular division. If, however, one is fortunate enough to transcend the designation of birth in a particular society or community by being elevated to the standard of spiritual identity, then his swadharma, or duty, is solely that of serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The actual duty of one who is advanced in Krishna consciousness is to serve the Lord. As long as one remains in the bodily concept of life, he may act according to the duties of social convention. But if one is elevated to the spiritual platform, he must simply serve the Supreme Lord. That is the real execution of Swadharma. Text 3. One should cease performing conventional religious practices and should be attracted to those which lead to salvation. One should eat very frugally, and one should always remain secluded so that he can achieve the highest perfection of life. Purport. It is recommended herein that religious practice for economic development or the satisfaction of sense desires should be avoided. Religious practices should be executed only to gain freedom from the clutches of material nature. It is stated in the beginning of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam that the topmost religious practice is that by which one can attain to the transcendental devotional service of the Lord without reason or cause. Such religious practice is never hampered by any impediments, and by its performance one actually becomes satisfied. Here this is recommended as moksha dharma, religious practice for salvation, or transcendence of the clutches of material contamination. Generally, people execute religious practices for economic development or sense gratification, but that is not recommended for one who wants to advance in yoga. The next important phrase is mitta medhyananam. Medhyananam. Mitta medhyananam, which means that one should eat very, very frugally. It is recommended in the Vedic literatures that a yogi eat only half of what he desires according to his hunger. If one is so hungry that he could devour 1 pound of foodstuff, then instead of eating 1 pound, he should consume only half a pound and supplement this with 4 ounces of water. 1/4 of the stomach should be left empty for passage of air in the stomach. If one eats in this manner, he will avoid indigestion and disease. The yogi should eat in this way, as recommended in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam and all other standard scriptures. The yogi should live in a secluded place where his yoga practice will not be disturbed. And we'll stop here. It's almost 8:05, and we'll start tomorrow with text 4. Hare Krishna. Okay, we're waiting for the reflections of the devotees. I think I'm eating too much.
Okay, first is from Gopakanya Devi Dasi.
Hare Krishna Gopakanya Devi Dasi.
Hare Krishna, dear Maharaj, and all assembled devotees. Jai Ho Maharaj. All glories to your reading service to Srila Prabhupada's books. Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you. It is actually a very nice service, and I'm getting lots of reciprocation from devotees all over the world. I will continue. Thank you, by your mercy.
And from Bhakti Noah.
Yes, Bhakti Noel.
Hare Krishna, dear Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. I am so grateful to be here to hear this transcendental nectar today. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai, all glories to His divine grace. We're also glad that you're here to hear.
And from Anandamurti Devi Dasi.
Yes, Anandamurti.
Dear Guru Maharaj and all assembled devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you so much for today's reading of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, which is full of nectar for all the Vaishnavas. Today I heard the glories of the devotional service unto the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. Quote, a devotee's attention is concentrated only upon the eternal loving service of the Lord, and therefore the power of death has no influence over him.
Mm-hmm.
If one is elevated to the spiritual platform, he must simply serve the Supreme Lord. That is the real execution of Swadharma. Thank you so much, Maharaj.
Thank you very much for that lovely reflection. Hare Krishna, Hare. Lord Chaitanya's mercy is all-powerful, and Srila Prabhupada spread it all over the world. And the emphasis is to try to bring as many conditioned souls as possible to the lotus feet of the Lord. That is the pure devotional service that is most pleasing to the Lord and therefore most efficient and effective in finding out who we are in the spiritual world. It's not that we can achieve that level of consciousness by our own endeavor. It requires the special mercy of Lord Chaitanya. And the way to get the special mercy of Lord Chaitanya is to preach Krishna consciousness. From wherever we are, to whomever we know or come in contact with. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Well, Saturday night at the movies. Sometimes it takes time for them to type their questions or their reflections. Yeah, Krishna consciousness is so simple. It's so easy. It's easy to miss it. But Srila Prabhupada's books are so merciful because they keep repeating the essence again and again, so that we cannot forget what the essence of devotional service is. So we can develop a desire, an actual intense desire to render transcendental loving service to Krishna for his satisfaction and for no other reason. And automatically all the other benefits and all the other perfections of all the different yoga systems are achieved by this one act of pure devotional service. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai. Samabeda Bhakta Brinda ki jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bo. See you tomorrow night. Same place, same time, same topic, as Kapila Dev explains exactly how to execute the yoga system. Hare Krishna. See you tomorrow. Hari Bo.